I kind of think a team is like a puzzle. I think sometimes we have to put the puzzle pieces together and go, what's the picture? Because sometimes that pictures are just a bit messy, and sometimes you realise the whole piece missing. I think we have to have these conversations quite regularly, or there are gaps that we just can't see, and there are problems that we're not aware of.
We all get stuck in status quo, acting on autopilot and doing things that you would never design from scratch. Like, how are we going to work together as a team? How are some of these things going to work?
Most teams probably make a decision at some point about using a particular platform and not talking to each other out of hours. But then what happens over like a 3 to 6 month period is sort of bad habits creep in, and we're messaging each other on WhatsApp at 9 o'clock, or emails where the action that you need from someone isn't clear, or where actually the emails are really, really long.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is a Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week we pick a different topic to do with work and your career, and we share some ideas and some actions so that we can all navigate these squiggly careers, the ups, the downs, the opportunities, the obstacles, just with a bit more confidence, clarity and control.
And before we get on to what we're going to talk about this week, I just want to let you know about a pretty important milestone for the podcast, which is that we are very close to hitting 500 episodes, which you may not care about. But what is useful to know about this milestone is it is a moment when we release a pod book. I would do a drum roll if I could, but I can't. So
wait. There you go.
There's a desk roll. It's a desk roll with my fingers.
Sound effects. That's the equivalent of our sound effects. That's how professional we are.
High quality podcast, everybody. So what does a pod book mean? It is a collection of all of the one-page summaries that we produce for each episode. So why do I think it is useful? We get 100 all in one PDF. And I think it is quite useful to kind of scroll through it, almost like I would just do it at random. I'd be like, do you know what? I'm just going to look at number 65. I'm just going to look at number 33. And I'd be like, I'm going to do that one. Or there's like a contents page at the front of it where you could just scan down and you could just think, do you know what do I need a bit of squiggly support with? And then you've got a one-page summary with ideas for action and coaching questions and links to learn more from. So that is why the pod book is useful. And you can get it. I would suggest, best thing to do, sign up for Squiggly Careers in Action. The link for that will be in the show notes for this episode, or if you go to amazingif.com, there'll be a little thing that pops up when you're on the website that means you can sign up for it. Or follow us on LinkedIn. So go to Amazing If on LinkedIn and we'll be posting about it there. And if you still can't find it, just email us at Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com. So aside from the pod book, this episode is all about, I guess it's continuing our September theme. So our first episode in September, we did September stops and starts, stopping things that might be getting in your way, and starting some new things that might be able to kind of help you keep progressing, keep learning. Today, we want to talk a little bit about teams, because that was quite like individual last week. So we want to talk a bit about teams. I want to talk about things that you might have got used to doing in your team that might not be very useful. And we thought we would call out some common stuff that we see, perhaps in our team too, and some other things that you can do so that you're using your time as a team together kind of most effectively.
I was reflecting on this, and it's almost critical thinking about your team. And the reason I think that's useful is we know that we all get stuck in status quo, acting on autopilot and doing things that you would never design from scratch. I was thinking about some of the things that we do as a team, or that I've done in other teams. And if you were creating, like, how are we going to work together as a team? How are some of these things going to work? It's never what you would do. You wouldn't ever recommend it to anyone else, but you just get used to it. And it does take a bit of when you have to press pause to critically think about it, because it is hard. I always think it's so much easier to just keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
When you just everybody has so many asks of them, in the jobs they do, there's always there's so much to do all the time, like in everyone's job. Critically thinking about how you work as a team, I think, can just feel too hard to do. And so one of the things that I definitely recommend with some of the ideas we're going to talk about today, obviously because we're talking about teams, I'm like, this is a really good one to talk about as a team. And you're not blaming each other, or you're not trying to feel bad, because I think sometimes you could end up feeling like really awful about oh, why do we do things this way? Because you are pointing out things that are not working, which can feel a bit negative. But I think if you do this with that sort of it's not, oh, why do we do meetings in that way? We're not kind of blaming things, but actually almost like together, we're just trying to get better together. I think
Yeah.
it's the kind of mindset you bring to this probably is quite important.
Well, yeah, and I think it just gives people permission to raise these things, because if you haven't got like a space for this kind of conversation, then people might be feeling frustrated by stuff, or might be thinking, oh, this isn't a very good use of my time, but they don't quite know how to bring it up. So I really think a lot of this is some of the things we talk about, the team might go, oh, it's not really a problem, like we've got used to it and it still feels useful, and that's okay. But I think what we're going to talk about is 4 areas where we see that there is likely to be something that might not be working as well as it could do, and it is it's a good use of time to talk about it together.
So we've got 4 areas, and for each area, we're going to talk about what have you potentially got used to, why it isn't useful, and then what to do instead. So that you can maybe listen to us. Our suggestions might not be right for you, but perhaps at least a springboard to think about, well, what would you do? And interestingly, actually, I was putting some of these into Claude, my current preferred AI
I am being
language
played
model.
Claude. It should be like squiggly careers with Sarah and Claude.
Yeah. The new Helen is Claude. For some reason, it sounds French and quite glamorous. I don't know if that's true. But me and Claude were playing around with some of these this morning, and actually, we did all of this without AI, and then back to kind of critical thinking. I put into Claude a what else question. Like, well, we've already thought about some of these things that we're going to talk about, like what else, how else. I was asking it, what might I have missed? What do other companies do that I could learn from? I really like it. I'm really on board. I've gone from not using AI that much to being like, it solves all my problems. This is so good. So that might be, like you could do that live in your team, right? You could get your own ideas first, and then you could put those into whichever AI you use and go, well, what other ideas as well as these? Or if we approach this as a very different kind of company, what do you think they would do? That would be kind of quite a nice way to kind of either play devil's advocate or just to see your world in a different way.
I feel like it's like everyone's got like a chief innovation officer in their team, where it's basically like Claude, like make it better, come up with a new idea, see how would another do it, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so our first thing that we think that lots of teams might get used to that might not be very useful is everybody kind of doing the same role on repeat. So obviously we all have our particular job roles, so we're not necessarily saying swap those around because people have different expertise. But it's more like your roles in meetings or your roles on projects. Like often, maybe the same person is always leading the meeting, or it's the same person who always, like we have a meeting called our monthly metrics meeting, our metrics that matter. And maybe we go in the same order for that meeting, don't we? We go in the same order.
Yeah, we do it usually.
And it's probably the same person who shares the presentation every time. And you just kind of fall into that. It's like an autopilot thing. And there is an element of ease in doing that, because then people don't have to quite prep as much. But then I think sometimes you might miss out on the energy of someone doing it differently, or the insight that might come from kind of running the meeting back to front, where you're like, oh, I haven't thought about it that way before. So I think for this to kind of work well, you probably need to start thinking about, when are those meetings where we fall into the same roles on repeat? There's probably kind of 2 or 3 in a week or a month, and they're probably the ones to focus on first. And as well as, I guess, the reason why you might want to do it, I've talked about, we might see different things, but also it might not be very inclusive. Like, if it was you and me, it might be always you and me leading it, and someone else might think, I'd love the opportunity to do that, or I've got an idea, but I don't quite know how to get into the conversation because I'm always sort of stuck doing the same thing in that particular meeting.
Also, I think it just doesn't give you the chance to practice taking a different role. So, we all default probably most of the time to what you feel most comfortable doing. So you're very good at creating clarity and bringing energy to meetings. Like, I'll always have an idea for people. But, sometimes you're like, but that might not be what that is needed. But also there might be somebody else who would who would like to do those things. So it's one of the things that we've talked about before, but I always find quite helpful here around roles is, like your listening talking ratio.
Yeah.
So one of the things you might be like, well, my role here is to actually talk a bit more. I think we talk a lot about listening more because that's probably what most of us need to get better at. But there will be lots of people listening where it's like, actually, they maybe don't contribute as much as they would like to. Like even my partner was saying to me this morning, who's reflecting on meetings he used to be in, where he always got that, that after the meeting sort of regret of like, oh, I actually had something to say there, or I could have contributed something, but I sort of could, to your point, I wasn't sure when, and then you just go, oh, it probably doesn't matter, or
Get that.
oh, I'm not
meeting regret. Is that like do you ever have it?
Not now as much. I definitely had after meeting regret in big companies where, afterwards I'd think of an idea and I'd be like, oh, I wish I'd said that in the meeting, or I didn't feel like I contributed enough. Maybe I got a bit nervous about someone. Yeah, definitely.
I was thinking I would probably term it like a frustration more than a regret. Like, I'd be like, oh, I'm so annoyed that I couldn't get in, like rather than I wish I'd said it.
Yeah, no, I think I would say regret. And again, I think what to do instead here. So, we obviously you can rotate roles, but I don't think that just happens. I think in a team you actually have to be quite intentional about it. So thinking about the times where you are together, where there are kind of clear roles, like, well, maybe somebody, perhaps less so now, people don't take notes in the same way because you don't need, that's what AI can do, that Claude can do that for you. But you probably do have that person who, like naturally steers you through the agenda or ends up summarizing or whatever it might be. And so perhaps you actually even identify before you even get to the people, what are the roles that we need in this moment? Actually, summarizing would be really useful. We do need someone to kind of just talk us through and to kind of keep it on track. Maybe there are 2 or 3 roles. And then you just go, well, in this meeting, these people are going to do these roles. It's not a surprise. I don't think you ever want to put anyone on the spot with these. I think people need to know it's coming. But I think if you've got something that you do quite regularly, you could just put it in the meeting invite and be like, oh, so for us, we have that metrics that matter meeting. You could say, right, okay, for this metrics that matters meeting, we are going to go in reverse. Because we could, right? There's absolutely nothing stopping us doing those metrics.
No, you just always go, you're like, it's like a deck, isn't it? Like a presentation. You always start from page 1, or we will start from exactly the same metrics, lead the way. Like we'll just go backwards for once. It just, at the very least, I think it would just feel different. So you'd probably get a bit more engagement rather than just be like, people may be feeling disengaged until it's their turn or something like that. I was also thinking, you're right, you should play around with Claude on this. You could have a little role randomizer. So all you'd need to do is put into like Claude, like these are the 5 things we need to talk about in our meeting, and these are the the 10 people in it. Randomize people to roles or whatever. You could do, but you don't want to put people on the spot, but you could do it. You could do it.
You get it to help you generate those kind of different things. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, connected as a team to kind of spending time together. What loads of us will have got used to is recurring meetings. So there was some really interesting research from, not even research, it was just a sort of experiment that Shopify did, where they took out all recurring meetings for 2 weeks. Because they'd been smart enough to work out how much they cost. And then they said after 2 weeks, you can put them back in. So I like the low pressureness of that experiment, because they're sort of going 2 weeks is not that long. You're going to have the opportunity to bring them back if you think they're really important. And I might be getting the stat not exactly right, but it's definitely in this ballpark. It was about 15% of meetings, I think, that went back in. And most people just went, oh yeah, doesn't need to be a recurring meeting.
There's a really interesting post. I'm getting my phone because I want to talk about. Sarah will be like, don't pick up your phone midway through your podcast. But the reason I'm doing it is Stephen Bartlett on LinkedIn today. He's actually posted something about this exact point about killing meetings. It's quite aggressive. I'm going to show it on screen, which people will only see if they're watching this on YouTube. But it's quite like there's a man. I think he's got a knife. Can you see? It's a poster he's done. It says his Stephen Bartlett's title on this post says, "I'm at absolute war with scheduled meetings, not because I'm antisocial, because I've done the maths." And the post is basically this point around like the amount of time you spend on these kind of scheduled meetings that are just recurring and just eat into your time without a team ever really being aware of it.
Yeah, and so I think we all know why it isn't useful, because it's not a productive use of our time. There's always this catch-22, isn't there? Like, I've got too much to do, but then I spend all my time in meetings, so then I've not got the time to do the work I need to do. And in that research I was reading about Shopify, pretty much everybody agrees that their job satisfaction at work would increase if they spent less time in meetings. And I think often it's not that's all meetings, but I think often recurring meetings fall into that trap of we've just got used to it. We've just got used to turning up on a Monday at that time, and we just sort of do that. And like no one really questions it. We don't critically think about it. I do like putting a number on it. I don't think it's that hard. I'm sure, again, AI could work it out for you, but you could put a cost on that and say, well, if we are all doing these meetings that we're not quite sure how useful they are, even if it's just a question mark, this is how much it's costing.
Yeah.
And so what to do instead? You could do the Shopify thing. You could go 1 week, 2 week. Let's stop the ones that you're in control of. I appreciate if you're in a big company now. I'm just trying to imagine what would have happened if at Sainsbury's I just was like, yeah, like a lone wolf, just being like getting rid of all these meetings. So most of us have some control over some meetings, or as a team, the ones that you do as a team might be easier to just take out. I also think there are probably some less dramatic, certainly than Stephen Bartlett's post this morning on LinkedIn, less dramatic options that are more about taking things away or subtracting. So we have a recurring meeting on a Monday, for example, and I wouldn't want to take that meeting out because that starts our week with connection, and we're a team that works all over the place. So I sort of go, oh, I think I would be less satisfied at work actually if that meeting went. Like I look forward to that meeting. But could we make it half the amount of time? Does it have to be every week? Could it be every other week? And just sort of asking yourself some of those questions to think about, well, we've got used to it being a certain length of time and no one has ever questioned whether that's the right amount of time. And, it's a bit like, well, maybe this is not true for everyone listening, but I sort of go, oh, I spend the money I have. I'm a bit like you use the time that you've got, like the same. So if I've got a half an hour meeting, why do those meetings just seem to take half an hour? Probably because you're just like, oh, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what would happen if you were like, I think that Monday meeting for us usually is half an hour. If we made that 20 minutes, what would happen?
It's just
Be more focused.
Because like we were just talking before this, I was like, oh, something's gone in the diary. It's half an hour, but it probably needs 5 minutes. But it's because the setting for meetings, you have to work the setting for it is always half an hour. So it's like units of time are booked in our diaries like that. So you have to go and do something extra to make it a 15-minute meeting or something like that. But if everybody is doing it like that, then meetings that could be done in 5 minutes or 15, or actually what Stephen Bartlett was saying was a voice note. You could probably just send someone a quick voice note and say, like, let me know if you need me to follow up on it, rather than a meeting. Though I think it is interesting because you could tip too much the other way, couldn't you? Then like someone saying, oh, the meetings have gone out, but I've got 50 voice notes from people who've got this. So I think you do have to be careful with it, but it's just I think if you looked as a team about what all your recurring meetings were, and for everyone you said, do we keep it as is, do we reduce the time, or do we change the frequency, and you just stress tested each one of them so that they weren't just accepted.
I always think quite fun. Who loves meetings so much that they don't want to have a bit of a play with meetings?
So our third thing is one-to-ones, and this is an interesting one because I guess Sarah and I's context on a one-to-one is we've worked in lots of large corporates where just one-to-ones are the norm. You just have a one-to-one with your manager. It might be weekly, it might be fortnightly, it might be desired but never happens because your manager just never does them. But there's this language of one-to-ones, and in theory it's a time where you are able to, I think, maybe like align on your priorities and unlock problems and get your questions answered. But I think sometimes they just, I don't know, they're a bit of a catch-up chat, and all the usefulness of them doesn't actually materialize. And so you kind of have these one-to-ones, but they're not really doing what you need them to do in terms of your work. And Sarah and I's reflection was we've gone from kind of corporate life into running our own company, which we don't really want to feel like a corporate. And we have just taken into this work some of the things that we had from our corporate life. And one-to-ones is one of them. And so we're starting to go, actually, are one-to-ones doing what they need to do? Are they something that we've got used to that has actually stopped being useful? And so I think this is one that feels very real for us right now, because we're thinking, well, what could we do instead? If we think they're not doing all of those things that we need them to do in terms of clarity and prioritizing and problem solving, then how else could we do it? So I think we need to talk to our team about this, but I think one of the things we're going to experiment with Hello, team.
This can't be the right way to tell our team stuff.
No, we need to talk to our team.
Podcast.
They will know before this goes live. But it's taking one-to-ones out and replacing them with sort of less frequent conversations, but potentially more meaningful ones where they play to Sarah and my strengths. So, for example, if you do need a bit of clarity creating or a problem solving, then you can schedule those with me. You can schedule because I'm good at that, and that I can do that in a quick meeting. Or actually, if you do need a bit of a challenge or a bit of perspective, Sarah, you're very good at kind of zooming out and questioning. And so what we are trying to do is, rather than just having this sort of default one-to-one that goes in that's supposed to cover everything and sometimes just turns into a nice chat, we were trying to have kind of identify, go to Helen for when you need, put this time in for Helen, and be more specific about matching your need to the person is what we're trying to do a little bit, instead of just one-to-ones that cover everything.
I also think what's interesting about this is kind of letting go of levels. So often I think you do get a bit, your development and also your one-to-ones tend to be with somebody more senior, with your manager. And I think this is true in big companies as well, but especially in our company where you are smaller and you have a load less structure, is having a conversation with somebody, a purposeful conversation, is usually because you've got like an outcome in mind. I'm feeling a bit confused about something. I need to create clarity. I've sort of lost sight of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I need the ability to zoom out. And that doesn't have to be with me or you. And again, I think because we are used to working in a certain way for 20 plus years first, you go, oh, we sort of went, oh, one-to-ones have to be with Helen. And you go, well, but they don't. No, you know, what they are is they are a conversation usually to try and achieve something. So I think actually almost it's a bit like Priya Parker's stuff on why gatherings work and when they work really well. It's when it's 100% clear, you know, like what we are spending time together for and on. So I can imagine, say, meetings going into Helen's diary that look different, where it might say the invite is like creating clarity on, I don't know, a partnership we're working on. And it's 15 minutes. And Helen goes, oh, I'm really clear. Like, I'm turning up for a conversation with Sarah in our team to create clarity on that learning partnership, because maybe it's all kind of got a bit messy. And I know Helen's really good at creating clarity. And then suddenly that just, you know, like you all turn up very focused.
I think we might be asking too much of a manager and too much of a meeting to be, you know, like a bit of an emotional connection, a bit of a problem solving, but prioritizing. Like, it's just asking quite a lot. And I think it would be much more useful if people were really clear on this is how I can help you. Like, I'm going to be the best person you can talk to if this is what you need. And to your point, recognizing that some of the other things that you might need, your manager might not be the person to talk to. And so in the team, you know, if I think about, if I kind of mapped our team, there are people that I think are amazing at empathy. You know, if you're going through a tough time, they're amazing for that. And there are people like ideas. There is no one better than you, like, because you love it. Like, oh, I could do with some ideas, like have an idea conversation with Sarah. And I think almost if you banned the word one-to-one just for a bit, you know, just say like for the next quarter or the next month, if that feels too scary, ban one-to-ones and replace them with like these 15-minute conversations. But what you do need to know is like what kind of conversations can you have with different people? So problem solving conversation with me, clarity creating conversation with me, idea generation conversation with you, and just have those in the diary rather than these sort of one-to-one, one size fits all discussions.
Yeah, I guess for it to work, you've all got to be able to talk to each other first about how you can be helpful. So when we were preparing for this, that's the question we both asked ourselves and each other. Because we were debating this and we were like, well, what would we do? And then we both just said we actually saw each other this week. We were like, okay, well, how are we helpful? And initially I was like, oh, I don't know, really. It took me a moment. And actually for some things, I think we got there very quickly. But other things, and I was thinking about this again this morning, some ways that I can be helpful are often not meetings. So one of the ways that I know I'm helpful is, and it even gets referred to in our team as like the Sarah scan. I'm good at looking at something that I've not seen before. I'm working out, is the tone right? Does the brand look right? Making some changes. I don't need a meeting to do that. But also it would help me probably to be focused on that and not forget and not to miss it. You know, if someone was like, can I almost have like a 10-minute window for a Sarah scan? This is what I need. This is when I need it by. And yeah, okay, yeah, great. We don't need to chat about it. But I do need to just read it and then add some comments. Then you might need to chat depending on how clear it is. But then I think you're always being specific makes things so much easier for everyone. And I think I'm often guilty of not getting this right. Like I love talking to people in the team. And sometimes I don't start with that really good question, like, what's most useful for you? Or what do we need from our time together today? I perhaps just have some things in my head, and then that's sort of where you start. And it does become quite meandering. And it's not to say, I'm always a bit worried about, you don't want everything to be like hyper productive in a sort of soul destroying, zapping way. Like, no one needs that.
Don't talk to me about life, Sarah. I'm here to solve a problem.
Yeah. And it could get a bit robotic, couldn't it? And then we could all just replace ourselves with AI. You're like, there's got to be some humanity in all of this. But I don't think I do this particularly well at the moment at all. Yeah, I can see so much room for improvement, like in our team, but also in myself.
So our last one was really about communication and collaboration. So we think that lots of teams have got used to ways of communicating with each other and ways of collaborating with each other, which actually might not be that useful. And our reflection was, you kind of start with good intent. So most teams probably make a decision at some point about using a particular platform and not talking to each other out of hours and all these kind of things. And then what happens over like a 3 to 6 month period is sort of bad habits creep in. We're messaging each other on WhatsApp at 9 o'clock, or we're, doing sort of, I don't know, emails where that action that you need from someone isn't that clear, or where actually the emails are really, really long. So someone has to take 10 minutes to go through it to work out, what is it that you need from me? And again, it's not to be sort of critical and blamey about those things with people, but it is, I think, as a team, taking a moment to review, well, what channels are we using at the moment as a team, and what's working and what isn't. And I was actually writing down I was thinking, if I was to have a little 30-minute conversation with a team about communication and collaboration, I would talk about times, like when are we talking to each other? And I'd talk about channels. So when and where are we talking to each other? I would talk about the volume. Does the volume of communication feel right, or are we getting it wrong? And I also wrote down responsiveness. So, because I think this goes both ways, right? Like, just because I send an efficient email, if you then don't respond to it, then it communication falls down. It's obviously a two-way thing. And I think talking regularly with a team, a bit of like a review and a reset on those things could be really helpful. And one thing I did, and this probably works, I'm sure lots of other platforms have this, but we use Microsoft Teams as like the platform that we primarily use for our communication and collaboration as a company. And they have like a little bit of software called Viva within Microsoft, where you can analyze certain things about your communication, your collaboration. So it tells you who are the people that you talk to the most, both in the company and outside the company.
I can see myself on there.
A little star, Sarah, obviously. Imagine if you're like, she talks to other people more than me.
I am looking at that obviously next, but I'm like, oh, who won? I win.
Interesting. And I think you could compare these as a team. How many emails you read versus how many emails you send. So mine was really weird there. Like, I had way more emails that I'm having to read because I get so many of them versus the amount that I actually send.
I can see on the diagram that you've showed me. Yeah, you do have a big proportion of read versus sent.
Yeah, so within 4 weeks, I had 1,400 read, but only 1,800 sent. And again, it's more, I think if you just talked to each other about that and you were like, oh, Helen's a bit of an outlier there. What's going on? Why are we getting so...
I should do mine and compare. Yeah, so yours are 1,412 read, but 187 sent. I think you said 1,008, but it's 187 sent. So actually there's a massive difference, which might not be wrong. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so I think when you compare it, you're then getting the insight, and you can also compare your communication habits, like how many hours you're spending in meetings, how many hours you're spending on email. It's quite, I just think it's sort of data that can drive a discussion. As a team, you need to make the decision. I'm not sure I 100% trust all of this data, but I think you can use it to at least compare and discuss, and then go, okay, well, over the next 6 months, what are we going to decide to do? But I do think this is an every 6 months check-in thing, because I just think everyone's working, everyone's busy. These bad habits creep in and change even our best intent.
Yeah, and I guess if you don't do it, I was thinking about something like the consequences, or like maybe sometimes the unintended consequences. I was looking back at our mistake moments, which we all share as a team in the same Teams channel. So you can really easily analyze them, which is useful. And I think when we get into miscommunication over collaboration or those kind of things just not working, it often results in things being missed. You and I in particular, we can't keep up. I see quite a lot of our team re-asking for the same thing. And you go, well, that's not good for us because we both feel like, oh, that's, we've obviously missed something. You know, like I don't ever feel good when I see that. But also that's annoying for other people, right? You're like, okay, I'm re-tagging, I'm re-flagging, those kind of things. And I think there are often signals and signs that you can look for that might tell you your communication isn't quite working. So that was one that I saw in our team. I was like, oh, there's some mistake moments where things just get missed. Like on some days the volume can be quite high, and there might be lots of asks of the same people. So let's say you're like, well, there are 25 asks today, but they're all of Helen. You know, and so you're like, well, the likelihood is you're going to miss something along the way. And then there is sometimes your point on length. I think we don't seem to have, I think the ones that seem to work well when we're on Teams are, you know, quick fire messages and we're going back and forth. Doesn't need to all be at the same time. But there are some times where you're like, wow, that is a really long message. And you and I were both talking about both of our response to that was I sort of looked at it and went, that feels just hard to figure out. I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. And you just sort of went, because you're so kind of fast and reactive, you're like, well, that's just too long. So I kind of get confused by it. I think you just sort of move past it. And so again, conversation with the team to sort of say, and I don't think anyone wants those, right? Just like you don't want long emails, you don't want long Teams messages. If something almost gets past a certain point, what might we do? Is it pick up the phone, as much as I don't like phone calls? Is it pick up the phone, old school? Is it do a video? Is that one of the 15 minutes? Oh, Helen, Sarah, I need a getting unstuck, or we need to make a decision, you know, back to decision discussion agendas. Yeah, I think some of those things, I always remember somebody telling me I worked for once that almost once you got to like an email that was any more than 3 bullet points, her like rule of thumb was any more than 3 bullet points and you've got to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And I remember that's always stuck with me, just as like a quick proxy, like even if it's not an email, even if it's just a Teams message. If like today, actually, I was doing something probably because I was thinking about this, and I nearly put quite a long brief for something into a Teams message. And then I thought, actually, do you know what? No, I need, you know, like this needs to be a Word document. This needs to be something separate that you can keep updating and keep coming back to. And this is not just a message. And I think that is that voice in my head, that leader in my head going, but that brief is not just 3 bullet points, is it, Sarah? So, you know, basically don't be lazy. I think sometimes it's actually the lazier option to just like put it all in there, because you have to think. I had to think a bit more to be like,
isn't it?
brief.
Long and lazy because you're just probably doing what works for you without, you know, working out
Yeah,
what the other
works for the other person.
works for the other person. So yeah, I think on all of these, the way I would think about this thing with like kind of what we get used to that might be not be useful is that I kind of think a team is like a puzzle. We're all a bit of a puzzle. And we're often only seeing our piece of the puzzle. And I think a lot of these things, whether it is one-to-ones or whether it is the way that we communicate or whether it is the roles that we play in meeting, I think sometimes we have to put the puzzle pieces together and go, what's the picture? And I think sometimes that pictures are just a bit messy. And sometimes you realise there's a whole piece missing. And and I think we have to have these conversations quite regularly, or there are gaps that we just can't see and there are problems that we're not aware of. So I don't think it's bad. I think it is a healthy team reviews some of these things quite regularly and then sort of makes little adjustments. But if you're not having the conversation, you can't take the action.
And in lots of ways, I often think it's quite a playful thing to do. So
Yeah.
you could see this as a problem, or you could see it as we're going to have a play. Let's have a play with the things that are in our control. Because often, as well as a team, if I think back to all my days in all big companies, same for you, there's loads of things that you couldn't do. So the things that you can do in your team that you can have a play with, I'm like, oh, that's quite motivating, because I'm like, well, I can determine that and I can do something different. I can try something out, because there'll be a whole load of stuff where I'm like, well, I couldn't change that even if I wanted to. I might not want to go to a steering group for 3 hours, but
But I
nice. But I sort of can't. I can't change that. But maybe what I can change, because I'm leading a team, is how I do my team meetings with my team. And so, just sort of, I think there's quite a nice bit here about like control and being able to play, and like doing the things in your world, even if it's kind of a small thing versus your whole big organization. If you are listening and you work in like a big complicated company where you think, well, I would love to turn off WhatsApp, but my 5 other teams all use it all the time, or I'm in a global function where messages are coming left, right and centre. I think it's okay to sort of almost start and think quite small here.
Yeah, experiment together as a team. So what we will do is we'll put those 4 kind of common areas that we think are kind of ripe for a bit of experimentation into the pod sheet, so that you can look at them and you can see our ideas for sort of what you could try out instead. And if you've got any other things that you noticed, like, oh, this is a bit of a reoccurring issue for us that I think is not useful anymore, let us know. It'd be really interesting to hear about it. Just email us, Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com. And then 2 other bits of news that might be useful for you. So next week is the start of our sprint. So if you are not signed up already, please do. It is on squigglysprint.com. You can sign up and join us. We'll have hopefully about 10,000 people sprinting with us and learning together as a giant team next week.
And then a table drum roll for that, or not?
Yeah, another one. And then after the sprint, we're going to do something slightly different with the podcast. Sarah, would you like to let people know what's in store after the sprint?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be that dramatic for people, but maybe it'll feel a little bit different. It feels different to Helen and I when we were talking about it. So we want to make sure we keep being useful. That's our number 1 value in our company, and bring energy every week. And we also don't want to repeat. So we don't want to keep going back over old things. And obviously we've done 500 episodes. So there's not loads of career topics we've not touched on in some way. Though we do, sometimes spot something where we're like, oh, that's an interesting angle, or something's kind of topical. So our question to ourselves, I suppose, we were like, how do we make sure we keep being as valuable as we can be for everybody who is kind enough to listen? And so on a Tuesday, our episodes are going to focus on some borrowed brilliance. So that might be a LinkedIn person that we follow that we're borrowing brilliance from. It could be a book, it could be a podcast, it could be a stat or a data point. Anything that Helen and I see where we're like, oh, that's intrigued and interested us. It's got us curious. It's got us thinking. We will share the borrowed brilliance. So hopefully we all feel a bit smarter together. But what we will hopefully bring to the conversation is the so whatness. So to give you an example, I've recently read Moral Ambition. Quite a confronting read for anyone who has also read that. And that's a bit of borrowed brilliance. So you could just be like, oh, that's a good read. Or you could do what we're going to try and do is go, okay, so what does that mean for us in our squiggly careers? So that's going to be our Tuesday episodes. And Helen and I will take it in turns to bring lots of different borrowed brilliance. So I'm already looking forward to that. Sort of even more reasons to be curious, which is never a bad thing. And then on Thursdays, we are going to experiment with squiggly shortcuts. So this is where we are going to take really popular topics, important topics, where perhaps you don't want to listen to a whole episode, or perhaps you know someone who you think they just need the 5-minute version. They perhaps don't want to listen, who can believe it, to half an hour or 40 minutes about careers and career development. But what they could do with is the squiggly shortcut, 3 ways to ask for a pay rise, how to prepare for an interview, how to get started with your strengths. And so we're going to look back over the episodes that we know have been really popular. We've had loads of listens. We're also going to think about the areas that we know will work well for shortcuts. We'll be recording them as new, so they're not just a sort of highlights reel. We'll kind of go back and we'll put that filter over, like, right, if we were going to make it just 3 things, but they will be 5 minutes. They'll be out on a kind of Thursday. Maybe they'll be useful for you to share with some people who don't listen today. Maybe they'll be useful for you. And we're just going to see. We're just going to see if they feel helpful.
Sprints, borrowed brilliance, and squiggly shortcuts are all coming soon on the podcast. And make sure you're signed up for Squiggly Careers in Action, because all the links for everything you ever need to learn with us is there for you.
So that's everything for this week. As always, thank you so much for listening. And we're back with you again next week sprinting. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.